about God. In the resurrection, you will not be married. While saying this, he said that he was the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, the forefathers of faith. So they came to put Jesus through trouble, but Jesus said just one word, and they were stunned as if they had been hit in the head with a bat. Then Jesus came and said, I am God. I am the Messiah. You must believe in me to be saved. It's written in John 6, 7, and 8. Asking about Christ, let's read that. Find Matthew chapter 22. Jesus is arguing with the Sadducees who say there is no resurrection and the Sadducees are defeated. And the Pharisees who did not know about it ask questions. Starting from verse 34 to the last verse. Ready? Begin. But when the Pharisees heard that Jesus had silenced the Sadducees, they gathered themselves together. One of them, a lawyer, asked him a question, testing him, Teacher, which is the greatest commandment in the law? And he said to him, You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your mind. This is the great and foremost commandment. The second is like it. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. On these two commandments depend the whole law and the prophets. Here, look. Here, clearly, in Matthew 22, verse 34. The Pharisees gathered when they heard that Jesus had made the Sadducees unable to answer. Verse 35. One of them, a lawyer, asked him a question, testing him. Teacher, which is the great commandment in the law? Jesus said, the greatest commandment is to serve God with all your heart and with all your soul. The second is to love your neighbor as yourself. He said the whole law and the prophets depend on these two commandments. Jesus was not an ignorant man. They lost again. This morning, the Lord, not even able to eat breakfast, he is near death, exhausted, can't even speak. On these two commandments depend the whole law and the prophets. When the Pharisees asked Jesus, Jesus asked them, What do you think about the Christ? So Jesus asked them in return, because they kept saying that Jesus was a heretic and was fake. After the lawyer asked, Which commandment is the greatest? Jesus asked the Pharisees in front of a large crowd of people. What do you think about the Christ? He asked them. Whose descendant is he? So these guys say, descendant of David. Jesus said, really? The descendant of David? Why did David call his descendant Lord? Then how does David in the Spirit call him Lord, saying, The Lord said to my Lord, Sit at my right hand until I put your enemies beneath your feet. David called the Christ Lord, Jesus. So David called his descendant Jesus Lord. Look, how is Jesus the descendant of David? He asked back. If David then calls him Lord, how is he his son? No one was able to answer him a word. From that day, they became like mute dogs. They were not able to speak and could not say anything to Jesus. This was today, during Passion Week. If I were to do it like this, I won't have time to say everything. You wrote everything about the commandments, right? Next, write down questions about the Messiah. Matthew 22, verses 41 through 46. Mark 12:18 through 27, Luke 20, verses 27 through 40. To put it simply, when Jesus said, "You brood of snakes, you brood of vipers," he was not referring to real vipers or real snakes, but to the religious leaders at the time who had the same mentality, the same heart as snakes. Jesus did not see them as people. They were just full of poison, harming others. Write this down. Matthew 12, verses 20 through 37, verse 33. We'll read only verses 20 to 37, Matthew 23, verse 33. Write it down. Attacking the Pharisees. Matthew 23, verses 1 through 12. Mark 12, verses 38 to 39. Luke 20, verses 45 to 46. Then, a warning to the Pharisees. Then, the 7 woes to the Pharisees. Look at this. Even if you are just cursed once, it's not easy to take that in. But Jesus cursed them 7 times. 7 times. Cursed them 7 times. They are called the 7 woes. Write them down. Matthew 23, verses 13 through 36. Luke 11, verses 37 through 52. Then today, Jesus' lament about Jerusalem while weeping. Jerusalem, Jerusalem, how often I have wanted to gather you together as a hen gathers her chicks under her wings, but they did not want it. He said their houses would be ruined, right? All your children will be brutally beaten and killed. This is what Jesus said today, 33 years old, 4 days before the cross. Less than 40 years later, General Titus came to Rome and fulfilled Jesus' prophecy, didn't he? There was nothing that did not come true. It's truly incredible. Matthew 23, verses 37 to 39. Luke 13, verses 34 to 35. Then the widow's mite, or lepton. Lepton. Mark 12, verses 41 through 44. Luke chapter 21, verses 1 through 4. Then the Greeks who sought Jesus. Today, what kind of people are the Greeks? Write this down. John 12, verses 20 through 22, 23. Acts 17, verse 21. Second, Jesus' words. To whom? To the Greeks. John 12, verses 23 to 26. Third, Jesus' distress and the voice from heaven. John 12, verses 27 through 33. Fourth, the crowd's questions and Jesus' answers. John 12, verses 34 to 36. Next, the Jews' disbelief and judgment. The Jews' disbelief and judgment. John 12, verses 36 through 50, and chapter 8, verse 59. Next, blind disbelief. It would be better to know and disbelieve, but they just believe without any basis or end. If others say he's a heretic, they all say he's a heretic. All of them. If other people say he's a heretic, that person says he's a heretic too without even knowing what it's about. I mean, if a dog barks when someone comes inside his own house, aren't there dogs that bark when the dog next door barks? All the religious leaders at the time, all of them were like that. I'm not the one saying this, but Jesus said this. blind disbelief. John 12, verses 36 through 41. Next is the faith of a coward. It's so vile. The faith of a coward. John 12, verses 42 to 43. Next is the inevitable judgment. The inevitable judgment. John 12, verses 44 through 50. Next, the destruction of Jerusalem and the warning about the end times. Matthew 24, Mark 13, Luke 21. Now, the destruction of the temple in Jerusalem. Matthew 24, verses 1 through 2, Mark 13, verses 1 through 2, Luke 21, verses 5 through 6. Next is the warning about the end times. The warning about the end times. Matthew 24, verses 3 to 14. Mark 13, verses 3 through 13. Mark 13, verses 3 through 13. Luke 21, verses 7 through 19. Next is the Great Tribulation. It's the greatest tribulation ever. There has been no such great tribulation since creation. The Great Tribulation. Matthew 24, verses 15 through 28. Mark 13, verses 14 through 23. Luke 21, verses 20 through 29. If you write them all down, it will be the number one treasure in your household. Next is the time of the end times. Matthew 24, verses 32 through 41. Mark 13, verses 28 through 32. Luke 21, verses 29 through 30. Next, preparation for the end times. He said to prepare for the end times. Matthew 24, verses 42 through 51. Luke 12, verses 11 through 48. Next is the parable of the 10 virgins. Around noon, the parable of the 10 virgins. Matthew 25, verses 1 through 13. Next is the parable of the talents. The parable of the talents. Matthew 25, verses 14 through 30. Luke 19, verses 11 through 27. This is what Jesus said, even as he couldn't drink a bowl of cold water or a bowl of water, and his mouth was completely dry. Everyone, when you read the Bible, think about the Lord's actions and pray in the name of the Lord that you will experience a miraculous and great work of grace as you desire, and this I bless upon you in the name of the Lord. Next, the parable of the sheep and the goat. Matthew 25, verses 31 through 46. Then, in the afternoon, there's the Jewish conspiracy, the conspiracy of the Jews. Matthew 26, verses 1 through 5. Mark 14, verses 1 through 2. Luke 22, verses 1 through 2. And then John 11, verses 45 through 57. Look at this. In Bethany, Martha and Mary's brother Lazarus died and came back to life, right? The town was turned upside down because of Lazarus, and now the rumor has spread. The news had spread throughout the land. So at the time, the Pharisees, priests, scribes, elders, and all others gathered together. and decided to kill not just Jesus, but also to kill Lazarus as well. These men, that's what they decided. So how much would Jesus' heart ache? Jesus is God. He is watching right now. He's suffering the pain that is like a knife stabbing into his heart right now. He could have died alone, but they're saying, let's kill Lazarus too. Then wouldn't that stop evangelism? Jesus' death alone was a death for the redemption of humanity. But why did poor Lazarus have to die? So Jesus' heart is suffering double and triple the pain. It's unspeakable. That's today. Today. Write this down. Receive the pouring of oil and perfume. Matthew 26, verses 6 through 13. Mark 14, verses 3 to 9. John 12, verses 1 through 8. Look, this woman of faulty behavior was watching. 300 denarii is a lot of money. The woman came in and let her hair down. A young woman. She was pouring perfume. Perfume is pouring down Jesus' head just like that. 300 denarii is a lot of money. The woman shed tears, let her hair down, knelt at Jesus' feet and wiped his feet. Judas Iscariot said, "This woman is out of her mind." In today's terms, she's insane. She had an expensive item, a bottle of perfume that cost 300 denarii, which was incredibly expensive. Judas said, how much better it would have been if she had sold it and given it to the poor. Jesus said, what are you talking about? This woman is currently holding my funeral. She's currently holding my funeral. So I ask you to share the story with the poor wherever this gospel goes. Judas said it would have been better to use this expensive thing for the poor, but Jesus said, he is a thief. Jesus said that Judas would steal from the offering bag and would steal if it were sold and put it in as offering. He said this in John 12, verse 6. He said this clearly in John 12, verse 6. This afternoon. This is what he said in the afternoon when he could not even eat. What you wrote down right now, when you talk, your tongue becomes all stiff and your body becomes stiff. People need to eat in order to do things. Either you have to eat fruit or drink some cold water. In the midst of all this, Jesus said, if you give me a bowl of cold water, they will never lose their reward. He said this because it was to that extent. When you go to the theater and watch a movie on the screen, you get really emotional, right? That's because you become emotionally involved. People who believe in Jesus must believe in that manner when you read the Bible, just like how you cry when you watch a movie in the theater. It's truly heartbreaking. He harassed her so much that Jesus said, don't bother the woman. She's holding my funeral. So the other people are dull. They don't understand what he's saying. Did Jesus die? Why is he saying that it's his funeral? He's alive and well. What kind of nonsense is he talking about? They didn't know. When you read the Bible, it says after the Lord suffered, was resurrected, and received glory, that is when the disciples finally realized. Who among the tens of millions of people under the sky would have known that this woman was holding Jesus' funeral? I'll tell you in the next sermon. Next, Judas's betrayal. Listen carefully, that's today. 11 of the 12 disciples are like stray dogs. They don't know what's going on. But one goes to the high priest, and they're discussing how to kill Jesus. He opens the door and says, "Hello, who are you?" "I'm Judas, a disciple of Jesus of Nazareth, whom you hate." "What are you?" "I'm the accountant in charge of the money." "How much will you give me to hand over my teacher?" "I will give you 30 pieces of silver." After he was promised that, he slowly looked for an opportunity to hand Jesus over like a fox when there was no one around, right? That's today. Jesus, who bore the sins of mankind, came so that not a single life would be lost. But he lost the entire city of Jerusalem, his aching heart. He lost his relatives. He lost his family. Didn't all the 12 disciples abandon him and run away? This was prophesied in Matthew 26, verse 31, right? When we look at the words of Matthew 26, verse 56, they all abandoned him and ran away. Jesus, who is God, is tied up with ropes and shivering in the winter without any clothes on, wearing only a single piece of clothing in front of the courtyard of Caiaphas. He is interrogated. "Are you the Messiah?" "You are right." However, when he was asked, "Do the 12 disciples still believe in you?" Jesus, who had raised his head and spoken confidently when asked about the Lord, was asked, "Do the 12 disciples still believe in you and follow you?" At this one word, in worldly terms, he was cut down to size and dropped his head. Why don't you answer? They all abandoned him and ran away, so what could he say? Then, from behind him, someone says, "I don't know Jesus." A little girl said she saw it with her own eyes, and others saw it too, so he swore, "I don't know Jesus." When he denied it for the third time, the Lord was standing before the judgment seat of the courtyard of Caiaphas, and he looked back. Jesus' eyes met Peter's eyes. It was like being struck by lightning. Didn't he go out and weep and repent? It's heartbreaking. Hey, Jesus, are the 12 disciples still believing in you and following you? They all ran away. He couldn't say anything. But he's weeping inside, his eyes swelling. It's unbelievable. "I'll hand Jesus over. How much will you give me?" That's today, right now. Jesus is watching. Write this down. Matthew 26, verses 14 through 16. Mark 14, verses 10 through 11. Luke 22, verses 3 through 6. John 13, verse 2 and verse 27. It's unbelievable, unbelievable. It's unbelievable. Jesus' last public evangelism, the last day. Many people here and there, speaking crudely, harassed him, asking questions that didn't even make sense. He replied, teaching them what is right, didn't he? One thing you should know is that there were about 6,000 Pharisees at the time of Jesus. It's recorded in history. Write it down. (157 BC). Pharisees. Now, 175 BC. 175 BC. Antiochus, the king of Syria. Epiphanes. When Epiphanes tried to eradicate Judaism and implant the religious customs of Greece, that's when the Pharisees came to be. Write it down. Pharisee means separation. It means separated ones. Separated ones. They were people who did their best to keep the law interpreted by the scribes. They were people who did their best to keep the law interpreted by the scribes. Write it down. There were about 6,000 Pharisees at the time of Jesus. The characteristic of the Pharisees is that they are thorough legalists, and they keep the law down to the smallest detail. You put a period at the end of a sentence when you write. They are people who diligently follow it to the dot. And they are extremely zealous about religion. Extremely zealous. And the religion of the Pharisees has become a superficial religion. So Jesus rebuked them as hypocrites. That's what you need to know. There's something you must know as well. Matthew 23, verse 4, write it down. It's written that he did not move a single finger. Write it down. They say that there are 613 commandments in the law of the rabbis. In the law of the rabbis. The rabbis say that there are 613 commandments in the law. They say that there are 365 commandments that you should not do, and 248 commandments that you should do. What is the number 613? They say that it follows the number of letters in the Ten Commandments. They are people who like to argue endlessly by distinguishing between the heavier and lighter commandments. And they harass Jesus with that. and challenge him with what they know, asking, "Which of the commandments is the greatest?" So they challenged him with what they knew in order to put him through trouble. Write it down. Jesus summarized the first part of the Ten Commandments by quoting Deuteronomy 6 verse 5 and Leviticus 19 verse 18, which the Jews were familiar with. And the first is to love the Lord, and the second is to love your neighbor as yourself. With this, Jesus summarized the commandments that we learned in Matthew 22, verse 34. Another thing to know is, I prepared a lot. And it's really indescribable. They're at a point they even wanted to kill Lazarus. Next, the parable of the thief, Matthew 24, verses 43 to 44. The parable of the good servant and the evil servant. Let's all find Matthew 24 together. Let's all read it together. Let's read from verse 37. Ready? Begin. For the coming of the Son of Man will be just like the days of Noah. For as in those days before the flood, they were eating and drinking, marrying and giving in marriage, until the day that Noah entered the ark. And they did not understand until the flood came and took them all away. So will the coming of the Son of Man be. Then there will be 2 men in the field, one will be taken and one will be left. 2 women will be grinding at the mill, one will be taken and one will be left. Therefore be on the alert, for you do not know which day your Lord is coming. But be sure of this, that if the head of the house had known at what time of the night the thief was coming, he would have been on the alert and would not have allowed his house to be broken into. For this reason you also must be ready, for the Son of Man is coming at an hour where you do not think he will. Who then is the faithful and sensible slave when his master put in charge of his household to give them their food at the proper time? Blessed is he, that slave, whose master finds so doing when he comes. Truly I say, put him in charge of all his possessions. But if that evil slave says in his heart, my master is not coming for a long time, and begins to beat his fellow slaves and eat and drink with drunkards, the master of that slave will come on a day when he does not expect him, and at an hour which he does not know, and will cut him in pieces and assign him a place with the hypocrites. In that place there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. Now look, there's nothing that goes against the Old and New Testaments. He came as he said, lived as he said, worked as he said, left as he said, and will come again as he said. But in worries that we would not believe, he spoke about the time of Noah. Look at the time of Noah. On the 10th day of the 2nd month, when Noah was 600 years old, God gave a revelation to Noah for the last time. Noah, I have waited a long time, for 100 years. He appeared to Noah 100 years ago and said, I will judge the earth, so build an ark. When we look at the Bible, God appeared once and never appeared again until the judgment of the flood. So I thought about this carefully. If God appeared to me and told me to do something 10 years ago, let alone 100 years, and if it's hard to live in this world and nothing goes according to the way I wish, then would I be able to believe for 10 years? We can't. That is why Noah's faith is amazing. God appeared after Noah was 500 years old and had 3 sons. On the 17th day of the 2nd month, when Noah was 600 years old, the judgment came, the judgment of the flood, on the 17th of the 2nd month. But on the 10th day of the 2nd month, God appeared 7 days ago. Noah, I have waited a long time. And 7 days from now, I will send rain for 40 days and nights and destroy this land and all of it. Noah realized this 7 days ago and entered the ark with his family. So Noah said to all his relatives, wasn't Noah the 10th generation descendant of Adam? Noah. Who is the 9th generation descendant of Adam? Noah's father Lamech. Then, Adam is the 1st generation, and 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th generation, Noah's father. What kind of world was the Garden of Eden? How he was deceived by the serpent and sin came into this earth. It was a world without any shortcomings and full of glory, a world where the sun and moon do not harm. And it was truly a paradise. But the sin, disobeying God's words, is so terrible. He would have spoken about that, but those grandchildren don't even listen to him. When we look at 2 Peter 2 verse 5, it says that during the judgment of Noah, not the godly but the ungodly descendants were all struck down. There are no godly people except Noah's family. Isn't he the first ancestor of mankind, the ancestor himself, Adam? Before he died, before he sinned, God was with him, and Adam could meet him. And wasn't it the world of glory? God gave Adam the solemn order to eat everything, but not to eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil that is in the middle. The devil said it was okay to eat, so they believed him and ate it. Just like the words of Romans 5, verse 12, death came to all mankind because of Adam's sin, even to us today. The coming of the Son of Man will be the same as the time of Noah. No matter how much they are told, they will not listen. So even if you look at chapter 24 today, verse 42 says, be on the alert. Be on the alert. Verse 43 says, be on the alert. Then, verse 44 says, be on the alert. Even when you look at Luke 21, verse 36, you will be able to escape all these things that are about to take place and stand before the Son of Man. So it tells us to keep on the alert at all times and pray, right? It will be the same at the end times. Will the Son of Man find faith on the earth? That's what God said. So in a world where it's becoming harder and harder to believe, a world where it's hard to pray, a world where it is really hard to come to church, people are stingy with offerings. They do not volunteer at church. They say, I'm busy, I'm busy. Everyone says they're busy. So keep on the alert and pray. Believers who are awake are those who say, by faith, I didn't know I was carried by the Lord, so you carried me. But how your feet must hurt as you suffered for the 6,000 years it took for you to come to me. Lord, I will carry you by faith. If you spend Passion Week with this heart, and if you come out tomorrow and until Friday, then there will be the proclamation of an unprecedented and amazing word on Friday. Please read the words I taught you and told you to write down before you go to bed today. And may we all know that the Lord did this today and pray. And this I bless upon you in the name of the Lord.